What is up, everybody, and welcome to FLW Videos. In today's episode, we're going to be extending into the top Pokemon by type series and talking about the top fairy type Pokemon in Pokemon Go. Now, this episode is going to be run a little bit differently than what most episodes are because I have a meeting very soon, but I still want to get a video out, and things have been so crazy around the house because we have a new puppy. So this is Lady. Lady is a great little dog, but is quite the handful, so forgive me for this video format, but we're going to talk about the Pokemon from a budget perspective, the best legendaries, the best shadows, the best megas, you know, all sorts of stuff like that. So I do think it's going to be fun, and we're going to walk through some raids to kind of talk about it, and then of course head over to the PvP side. So if you do enjoy this series, make sure to smash that like button, turn that like button shiny, and of course subscribe if you want to stay up to date on all Pokemon Go news, and of course get future looks at Little Lady. So anyways, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. So the best way for us to take a look at the top fairy type attackers from the raid side is to set up a situation where we can go in and of course highlight them. So we're actually going to be going up against a Hydreigon, and I put Hydreigon in as a tier 5, so that would be like a legendary raid. And that's literally just to get a little bit more time so we can really get some separation. If we end up going up against a fake Hydreigon at like a tier 3, then you end up having like a 2-second difference or something, and this way it lets us kind of see the separation a little bit more. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. So the first kind of topic that I typically cover in the series has to do with top budget options. Now, if I go ahead and circle through this list, I cannot tell you how many times in the past where I've classified something like a Togekiss as a budget option and got some major stick for it. And in hindsight, it makes a lot of sense. As time has gone on in Pokemon Go, the Togekiss family line just doesn't appear as much in the game. In the past, it used to. I mean, you could go out and catch a wild Togetic and not even get that excited about it in 2017, 2018, somewhere around that time. But as time has gone on, Togekiss has unfortunately slipped out of the budget option. Doesn't mean, however, that it is a bad option. It's simply just not a budget option. And then of course you have a Pokemon like Gardevoir. If you've attended some type of community day, it's more of a conditional, I guess, a conditional budget option. If of course you have the candy, you know, things like that. But as far as a true budget option is concerned, I would argue that Gramble is probably your best option out of all these other Pokemon. And then if we go ahead and scroll down a little bit, you do have an option like Sylveon, but Sylveon is conditional too because we just had Eevee Community Day. If you of course partook in the Eevee Community Day, then you'll know that you could get up to a Sylveon by just doing 7 buddy interactions as opposed to the 70. So conditionally, it was a budget option, but for any other point in time besides the Eevee Community Day, getting back up to 70 hearts, I just don't feel right calling Sylveon a full-on budget option, and it literally has to do with that buddy interaction. But if we go ahead and scroll down, I don't really see too many more. We will kind of talk about Clefable, but that's going to be a little bit more on the PvP side of it. So if I were to classify and pick a Pokemon as a top budget option, I would personally go with Gramble. And then as a little bit of a side note, you weirdly have the Pokemon Beartic, which has a double fairy type moveset that actually performs pretty well. So that happens occasionally. It is a pseudo fairy type attacker. So congratulations to Beartic using that move Charm. Now the next option that we have is a top non-legendary option. So we did kind of talk about it already. We've got Gardevoir, and then we also have the Pokemon Togekiss. So I think that these two Pokemon obviously are going to be great non-legendary options. Are they a little bit more exotic? Yes, to some extent compared to budget options, but they are completely solid. And at least in my opinion, something that I really like is the Togekiss side of things. If we're keeping it into context, we have to remember that we're talking about just the raid side, but Togekiss actually is a great investment, not only from the raid side, but also from the PvP side, and especially in Master League, which means if you end up getting yourself a Togekiss powered up to level 40, you're going to have one of the top 4 options on the raid side, and you're going to have one of the top 3 options from the fairy typing in that Master League Classic, for example. So I think that Togekiss is easily one of the top Pokemon that you would want to focus on a little bit more long term when you're talking about those fairy type Pokemon. So the next list that we have to talk about is top legendary attackers. So of course, we've got the Pokemon Zacian here, and Zacian, unfortunately, Zacian just could not get the moveset kind of lined up. Shame on you, Niantic. But we do have the move Play Rough, which is nice. And so I kind of mentioned that in the deep dive series talking about Zacian. It does have Play Rough. That's nice. But because we don't have a quick type move that is the fairy typing, we have to do some weird stuff to kind of get it to line up. And as you can see, despite the fact that Zacian actually ends up having very good stats, it ends up dropping in the performance because that moveset just can't line up and can't be efficient. You're competing against pretty much all other double fairy type moves, with the exception of Shadow Ursaring, but with Hydreigon being a part dark type, I mean, it kind of works in that particular case. So not a lot going on from the legendary side of things. And then the next topic that we have is the top Shadow option. So of course, from a performance perspective, you can see that Shadow Gardevoir is just crushing it. And then you've got Shadow Gramble that is also crushing it. So Shadow Gardevoir technically has a little bit more potential because Play Rough is an excellent move, and you've got Gardevoir using Dazzling Gleam, and then you've got Shadow Gramble using Play Rough. Now, in my honest opinion, yes, these are the best fairy type attackers from that Shadow typing. But you gotta keep in mind that we are isolating it down to just specifically look at the top fairy type attackers. If we go out into the wild and you're competing against many other Pokemon types that would, for example, be super effective, then Shadow Gardevoir may end up dropping a little bit in there. So it could be a fun Pokemon, no doubt. I would personally love to have one. If I had some high IVs on Shadow Gramble and then taking a look at Shadow Gardevoir, Gardevoir would obviously be the choice to go with. As you can see here, we have a time to win of 383, and then Shadow Gramble is at 433. So you're talking about 50 seconds of difference. And then because of Gardevoir going in there, only has 19 feints versus 25 for the Shadow Gramble. So Shadow Gardevoir, easily the top Shadow option. Now the next list that we have is a top Mega Pokemon. So obviously a limited selection once again. But if we go ahead and scroll down here, we can see that we've got Mega Altaria. So Mega Altaria is definitely a fun Pokemon to use. And if you're ever wanting to boost out the fairy type attackers, then of course go in with Mega Altaria. Mega Altaria is actually somewhat of a budget Mega option, if you will, because it has two different typings that can be somewhat relevant, where you could of course boost fellow dragon type attackers, you could of course boost the fellow fairy type attackers, and you're not having to do anything necessarily to kind of change that. Of course, if you use Dazzling Gleam, and then if you wanted to unlock a secondary charge move to go with the dragon typing move, like the Community Day exclusive move, then it only costs 10,000 Stardust to unlock a secondary charge move. So I think Mega Altaria has some serious kind of budget options all around that. So excited for it, Mega Altaria here. So the last thing that we have to do beyond the raid side is cover PvP. The first Pokemon that we're going to talk about is actually in the Great League, and talk about the Pokemon Azumarill. So Azumarill is a very solid option. It's ranked at the 7th position currently when we're taking a look at all of the Pokemon in the Great League. But something interesting that's been going on with Azumarill, at least temporarily, a lot of people kind of lost faith in Azumarill because you saw a Pokemon like Nidoqueen, for example, get a ton of hype, and because of it using some poison type moves, it ended up being a lot of competition to go up against that Azumarill. And in my opinion, I think Azumarill dropped its stock a little bit, but we've seen Nidoqueen kind of fade out a little bit. It was a little bit more of a fad than an option like Azumarill, and Azumarill has some solid stats, some solid moves, and it's kind of withheld the test of time, I guess is one way to kind of say that. So we've got Azumarill in here at the 7th position, looking great here. If you're interested in the top IVs, as far as the non-XL version of it is concerned, the rank 1 is at 815-15, so the level 40 is right around that 1500 CP. You could go with some XL options if you've got the resources to be able to pull that off. And of course, the candy is basically what I'm referring to there. But Azumarill is a solid option, and I think it's a great investment to have kind of long-term if you're looking for a top PvP Pokemon in general that just happens to be a fairy type Pokemon. So as you can see, we're not even using any fairy type moves here, which is kind of funny here, considering the topic of today's video. So let's go ahead and move over to the Ultra League, where we've got some kind of fun things going on here, where we can see that Sylveon actually took over the #1 spot away from the fellow fairy type Pokemon of Togekiss. So Togekiss has just been dropping and dropping and dropping. The more Pokemon that get released in the Ultra League, it still holds up very well in the Masters. So we can of course focus on Sylveon. But with Sylveon, you are going to have the Community Day exclusive move of Psyshock that we got from the Eevee Community Day recently to be able to pull this off. And I'm honestly so excited that you have Sylveon having a place in the meta in the Ultra League. Very excited about that. I just didn't want the Pokemon to just go completely useless by any means. So excited for Sylveon. And then as far as the rank 1 is concerned, this is real nice. We are not having to get into XLs or anything like that. Instead, it's a level 31. It is 0, 13, 15. So just the typical where you need a low attack stat and as high of an HP or as high of a stamina and high of a defense as you possibly can. So very excited for the Pokemon Sylveon. We're not going to talk about Togekiss now because there is obviously a huge gap here. And then you could go with Gardevoir with the Shadow, but it basically just becomes a pure charm user, and you kind of use it to sort of pressure people. You see it occasionally, but it's not like a dominant Pokemon, but there are teams that it ends up making a lot of sense, especially if you have like a full-on like Shadow team, for example. But anyways, we can go ahead and move on to the Master League Classic, and we'll go ahead and wrap this video up. In the Master League, we can go ahead and check out the Fairy-type Pokemon for the Classic, and you will see that Zacian actually makes it in to that top position, which is so cool for Zacian to finally get some play. And ironically enough, it ended up actually getting a different moveset than what was originally predicted. So they had to rerun the simulations, and the best moveset ended up being Close Combat and Play Rough, as well as Snarl. So I believe it was another Dark type move initially, but I guess that's kind of irrelevant now. We now have like the updated moveset that makes more sense here. So of course you want to go with a 100% IV Zacian if you can use it. And the fact that it ends up being put into that 17th position, I think is great. I think that Zacian versus Togekiss is just really a different conversation, because Togekiss is going to be able to put a lot of pressure using that move Charm, which is just devastating in this league. And then of course Zacian doesn't have a Fairy type quick move, but it is nice to see that Play Rough still ends up kind of getting used there when Togekiss, for example, is going with non-Fairy type moves, and Zacian is able to pull in that Play Rough. So excited for Zacian there to finally get some play in the Master League Classic. But anyways, I hope you did enjoy this episode. I know it was a little bit different, but hopefully you forgive me for the circumstances. New puppy, starting classes, just a lot of things kind of going on. And I'm having to go up on campus, which is a little weird, but hopefully that'll change and we'll end up going remote. But anyways, I would love to know what you think about the top Fairy type Pokemon in the comment section below. Make sure to put it down there. Let me know what your favorite Fairy type Pokemon is. And of course, I will see you next time. But not without saying a huge shout out to the supporters over at Patreon. Thank you so much. They've joined the exclusive Discord server. We talk Pokemon Go. We coordinate for raids. We just have a great time over there. So if you want to support the channel and connect with other Pokemon Go players, make sure to check out that Patreon link in the description below. And I will see you next time.